Drill sergeants of Reddit. What was the funniest thing a recruit said? I'm a military nurse and as part of our orientation we had to give vaccines to the new recruits at MCRD. One of the recruits was probably 4 foot nothing. They have yellow handprints on the wall for the bicillin shot and he couldn't even reach them. One of the DIS just kept yelling at him, "Defy all odds recruit, defy all odds." Standing in formation at Fort Knox about to head to the range and everyone needs their gloves. One private comes out without them and the DS screams, "Private, where the frock are your gloves?" In this thick Tennessee accent he goes, "Well damn drill sergeant. I must have done left them some breeches upstairs." The DS, from New Jersey, just dies laughing. One guy got selected to go to the Natick Human Research Center after basic, which is basically a place where they use soldiers in experiments to test new gear. So he gets his pamphlet or whatever from the DS and as he's walking away he says, "Well, I didn't want a robo-dig in my ass but I guess I'm getting one." And the DS just lost it laughing. Had to close the door to his office. Not a DS, but a Navy recruit. I was on colors duty and it's kind of windy in Chicago. One time, we did not tie the fastening ropes well enough so the flag ended up half-mast. Our RDC retrieves me and the other recruit from class an hour later and proceeds to yell at us and asks, "Who the frock died?" The other recruit, without missing a beat, says, "Chris Farley." Which was technically true cause he died a few days before. The RDC had to leave to compose himself, before proceeding to have us stand at attention for a few hours while all the other ship RDCs came by and made fun, yelled at us, making Farley and SNL jokes. Mid-80s in Marine boot camp. Got a letter from mom. She desperately wanted to send her number 1 son something. I mailed back, "Don't." Last guy who got something got bent while the instructors shared it and the rest of us watched. I'll give her this. She's clever. She sent me 107 Snickers bars. 1 for each of the 103 recruits. And 4 for the drill instructors. Boot. We picked up a 5th D that week. They made me open this big heavy ass package I got in front of them. That was the first time I'd heard them laugh. I got bent up front while 102 recruits and 5 Ds watched and slowly enjoyed their Snickers bars. I still hate Snickers. Not a drill sergeant. Back in 2000 at Paris Island we were doing Warriors breakfast after the Crucible. The series commander are asking questions like, "Where are you from?" and "Why did you join?" and so forth. They get to this Cambodian kid and they ask him why he joined up. His response was, "Because it was raining." The series commander is like, "Explain." It turns out the kid was like fresh off the boat in New York City. Didn't speak any English. And it started raining so he ducked into a recruiter's office. They signed his ass up and he just went along with it. He learned English in boot camp. When I was in basic training, there was someone going through their locker in the middle of the night making hella noise. So one of the trainees sat up in bed and screamed, "Shut the frock up." The person going through the locker was a drill instructor doing a random check. The trainee who told him to shut the frock up got ripped a new one, but the instructor was probably dying laughing on the inside. I don't know how they keep a straight face. Edit for everyone asking, this was Lackland 2018 lol. We were on a casual run for PT nice and easy 3 kilometers. Finish the run. Sit pump Private X walks up to the SGT conducting the run and says, "SGT, when does the real run start?" Thought he was hilarious. Ended up running 12 kilometers that day. Frock that guy. Asked a private the difference between cover and concealment. Private said, "Drill sergeant. You asked what seems like a very important question which I am supposed to know the answer." However, this private was imagining not being called on, and was not paying attention to the question. Drill sergeant. I ordered the platoon to form up facing west. One troop asked, "Master Corporal, our west or your west?" I just walked away angrily and let his peers sort him out. I came out of my office and they were facing east. Rifle range week in the pits. 2 DIS walk towards each other. An echo of, "Good morning, sir," as they walk past each recruit, until they converge on one. "Good morning, sir." "Sir?" "Breach, I know there's 2 of us." "I, sir." "Oh. So frock me, right?" "No, sir." "Then frock him?" "No, sir." "Well, it has to be one of us. So which is it?" Recruit. "Frock me or frock him?" 5, 4, 3. "Frock him, sir." Both DIS, making no attempt to conceal it, start bursting into laughter. The one who made him say it stumbles away in tears. The frock him D collects himself and provides some incentive training to the kid. Recruit fired all his blank ammo during ambush response training. He crawled and ditched to opposite where the aggressors were, and started throwing rocks at them. D came running in middle of the road blowing his whistle and screaming, "What the frock are you doing?" Single quote dot. Recruit screamed back, throwing hand grenades. Drill sergeant, without missing a beat. The D screamed, out frocking standing, and walked away. I feel bad for the guy but I gotta say it, his last name was Smelly. As in, smelly. So when I had him come into the class for the orientation admin day the very first day, I asked everyone to stand up and give their rank, name, serial number, so when I heard, Private Smelly, I lost it. I felt so bad for the guy. Edit. I don't know what fully came of Smelly, but this was back in 2007 and I had heard he didn't make it through BMQ. And VR'd. Voluntary release. This was in the Canadian Forces. My dad tells me this story all the time. Back in the 80s when he was doing basic training, the DS was going down the line asking why everyone joined and my dad was like, "Oh sit, I don't have a good answer for this," and was nervous. DS goes to the guy next to my dad, asks the question and the guy says, "To defend my country, sir." DS goes, "That's bullshit, you're here for the money and the education." And that became everyone's answer. Obligatory, not a drill sergeant. But I was US infantry, serving in Korea. We were part of a mixed US-Korea unit, and during a briefing, one of the Korean soldiers fell asleep. Our sergeant wakes him up and begins screaming at him. The soldier said, "No sergeant, you got it all wrong. In Korea, it's a sign of respect to listen with your eyes closed, because then you have no other distractions." The sergeant bought it, and as soon as the meeting was over and the sergeant was out of earshot, we all cracked up. "Sir, this recruit respectfully requests to go throw up." We were in the middle of a intensive training session. I allowed it. He ran to the bathroom, loudly emptied his stomach, ran back to me and said, "Sir, this recruit respectfully requests to resume intensive training." And he went right back into push-ups. He did well. Our DS called us a bunch of assholes who were not team players, so we came up with a cadence that had us yelling, week to week, cheek to cheek, us assholes stick together. The DS would try to hide his smiles when we pulled that one out. Marching the troops back to the barracks after lunch, I noticed a recruit with a white stain on his hip pocket. I halted the platoon and got in the recruit's face. Me. Recruit, that white stain on your shirt better be because you are excited for this afternoon's training. Recruit, no SGT. I am saving my snack for later. Me. What snack are you saving? Recruit, ice cream. Obligatory, not a DS. We were on the grenade training range in groups of 3. This is where there are various stations where you and your group have to throw dummy grenades at things. When you're the one throwing, you were supposed to yell to your group, "Cover me while I throw my grenade." This one guy from the south with an accent to match yelled, "Cover me while I throw this here grenade," before he lobbed it. I had never seen the DS monitoring that station laugh so hard. In basic training, stood by our beds. Inspection of platoon commander. In she comes. Walks around, asks everyone questions. Guy next to me, who I'm still mates with now, got asked what he did before he joined. He answered, proud as lunch and for everyone to hear, "I sold condoms and nuts, ma'am." Her and the corporals just started laughing, couldn't help it. Doing a ruck march in basic training. Wearing the patrol cap since we are at Heat Cat 5, aka it's really hot outside. There's a kid walking with his hat sort of coming off his head, with the brim pointed upward. Recruit is told that the hat must be worn where the cap band is parallel to the marching service. Recruit calmly states that we're currently walking uphill. Not a D. We were marching, standing in formation for a few hours doing parade practice over and over so the people running it could get the entire ceremony down pat. A military parade ceremony. Not a walk down the boulevard parade. For us in formation, it just sucked. At one point we'd been standing at attention for a prolonged period when I noticed the fellow in front and to the left of me was standing in a puddle. It hadn't rained. The guy had just relieved himself while standing at attention. Once the D noticed, he caught all kinds of hell for being an idiot and not falling out of formation to go to the latrine. I felt sorry for him and, myself, would have given him an award for outstanding military bearing. He didn't flinch or anything. At basic I got the whole DS team laughing from a comment. DS starts yelling at me in my face about God knows what. On and on. He is from the deep south and has a super strong Mississippi accent. I am an immigrant from South Africa. My accent sounds English or Australian to US people. Only been in the USA for a few years and have been living in Oregon. And honestly I can only understand a bit of what he is saying. At the end he concludes with, "Do you understand the words coming out of my mouth, Private?" I replied, "Drill Sergeant, no. I am really struggling with your accent, Drill Sergeant." There was silence for a bit, then they all started laughing. Required to have creases in your uniform. And if you know anything about it you can sometimes frock it up and give a shirt 2 creases, commonly referred to as railroad tracks. On morning in formation for uniform inspection it was discovered someone had done this to their shirt. So in come the dis. At one point one of them yelling asked, "Recruit X, are you a train conductor?" And sure as shit, he was before he joined. So he answered, "Sir, yes sir." Everyone got awkward quiet for what felt like 5 minutes, but I'm sure it was only 5 seconds. And then the group of them went on yelling at the next person in formation. When I say down, you say, "We are." When I say up, you say, weak-hearted, down, we are, up, retarded. I legit had to turn and walk away for a minute. Crying while doing push-ups. Gets asked, why are you crying? Answer, I'm not crying, sir. My eyes are sweating. I had a friend tell me this story. In the Marines, a chit is similar to a demerit. A Marine had something wrong with his uniform and was going to receive a chit. The drill sergeant gets in his face and yells, "Private, what is a four-letter word that starts with C and ends with T?" The private thinks for a moment and sounds off back, "Cunt, sir." To which the drill sergeant replies, holding back laughter, "No, private, a chit." Went to boot camp. Marines. In 2005, there was no room for bullshit back then. And I assume that is still the case. Well, about halfway through boot camp one night we finish everything and are in our racks to sleep. The moment the drill instructor flips the light switch off, one of the recruits yells across the squad bay, "Good night, sir." So simple, so stupid, yet so absolutely hilarious. We spent the next 30 minutes getting it in the dark. I still look back at the moment and laugh sometimes. The TIS came in at 2:00 a.m. on Easter morning to ransack lockers. One guy had his flashlight in the wrong spot. TI grabs the flashlight, taps it on the guy's head and says, "Shush, it's okay. I am just the Easter bunny. Watch me hop. I'm full of frocking chocolate and not even Jesus knows why." He then proceeds to jump on the guy's bed until the kid figures out what he did wrong. It's the same guy that hit me with a bed when he was mad and then got taken off night duty. He hated me the rest of the time. During inspection, the section leader would walk up to every recruit and look them over for issues with their uniform. Everyone had a cap badge on their beret and it's supposed to be over the left eyebrow. Unfortunately for me, when I put my beret on, the cap badge was directly in the middle of my head. SGT walks up to me, stares me in the eye and says, "Private X, are you the mythical Cyclops of the underworld?" Quite a few push-ups later and a lot of humiliation, I finally figured out what was wrong. Never made that mistake again. I had one recruit come up to me, in hysterical laughter, and say, "Petty officer, you have to see this guy's tattoo. It's holiday routine. Late in training, so not a lot going on." So I say, "Sure. Let's just call this kid Chuck." Chuck was a little off, but an outstanding recruit. If I told him to take an enemy-held hill, he would do it or die trying. He was in charge of head, bathroom, cleanliness, and did an exceptional job. Way too intelligent to be in the Navy. He is a nuke now. So Chuck shows me the inside of his bottom lip, and it says, "Bastard," and I'm all types of WTF. He was raised by his grandma and she said there are two types of men in the world, beautiful bastards and sorry bastards. Not a sergeant, but have a funny story from my training. We were coming back from a PT session and as we turn left around the side of the building onto the parade share, there's a Challenger 2 parked in the middle of the square. Big frock off British Army tank. As we are marching past it, our staff sergeant asks the platoon if any of us know what it is. Guy towards the back yells in the most confident possible way, "Yes, Staff Sergeant. It's a Ford Fiesta." Everybody burst out laughing and Staff is doing his absolute best to hold in this massive grin. The individual in question was later assigned a 3,000-word essay due the next day titled, "Why a Challenger Mark II is Not a Ford Fiesta." I went through OCS a couple years back. Our RDC was a stickler for making sure that our socks were pulled all the way up during PT and would routinely yell at candidates to pull their socks up by yelling, "Motivate your socks." A couple days into OCS and we're doing PT and the RDC spots a girl with her socks bunched at her ankles. He rushes over and gets in her face and requests that she motivate her socks. She, being new, has no idea what this means yet. He yells it again and she started to panic. She looks down at her socks and yells at the top of her lungs, "You can do it, socks." RDC does an about face and despite his best attempt he absolutely loses it while trying to make a hasty exit. Not a D, but when I was in boot camp, one was getting yelled at during chow by a D. I didn't know what to do when I answered him because I was sitting and you aren't supposed to address a D unless you are at attention. I didn't want to stand up and be yelled at for being aggressive, so I just lifted my butt, rested my back on the chair, and stood at attention. While sitting, the D started to laugh and looked away. I stayed at attention. He turned and looked me in the eyes and asked if a ghost just tried to give me anal. Not a drill instructor. But this happened during the Beast Week of USAF BMT. My flight was striking the soft Monakines with the stock of our M4 and as we did our T I kept yelling, "Let me hear your war cry." A fellow trainee had joked he was going to yell, "No means no." As it came to my turn and I laid one into the mannequin, I forgot to yell out. The TI yelled at me to strike again and to hear my war cry. In a panic I yelled, "No means no." As that was the first thing that came to my head. Totally shattered the TIS bearing and we all had a good laugh. In boot camp, a recruit needed to use the restroom and wasn't allowed to. The recruit pleaded that it was an emergency, so the drill instructor says, "I don't hear any sirens," and starts starting at the recruit. The recruit then proceeds to make siren noises. No one could hold in their laughter. I had a recruit I nicknamed Giggles, as she couldn't help but giggle anytime anything was happening or we were just still. I came up with a rule that anytime I caught her, she had to tell me a joke. And if it sucked, her whole squad had to push formation just before chow. We were sharking. And sure enough, Giggles starts her thing. Alright Giggles, let's hear it. Her response: how do you get an elephant in the subway? No clue Giggles. How do you get an elephant in the subway? You take the S out of sub and the F out of way. I walked 2 laps trying to figure it out, and finally turned to face her and said, Giggles, there's no F in. Just as I got it. Alright Giggles, you win this round. Obligatory. Not a DS. We had a newcomer to the unit. Fresh out of training, and his squad leader was a very boisterous black staff sergeant. He decided to mess with the kid, very loudly asking him where he was from. The kid said he was from Wisconsin. The staff sergeant yells, Wisconsin? I bet I'm the first black man you ever seen. Kid says, no, Sergeant, we have a black family in the county. 2002? I was just one of the recruits. Army Basic. FT. Leonard Wood. One of the field training days for learning some piece of gear. Don't remember what. Drill sergeant calls on recruit to sit the chair as a demonstration. Recruit obliges. Obviously. DS walking around talking. Explaining. Platoon sitting in large circle around chair. DS. Almost as soon as DS starts talking, recruit's head is nodding off. By the time DS gets back around front, recruit is asleep. That's when the DS realized other recruits had been truthing when they said this guy had mild narcolepsy. Not a D. But, the first few hours at boot camp are focused on fear and issuing you basic equipment. This looks like basically stripping down to nothing while in ranks and putting on a uniform as ordered, with attention being called between phases of dressing up. In my recruit division, we had just been issued socks, underwear, and PT gear and were given the order to strip to our underwear and come to attention. As we all come to attention, we hear the RDC in charge of gear issue yell, Recruit, what the fuck do you think you're doing? Recruit answers, I forgot my underwear. Petty officer. Turns out this guy had also been going commando apparently in preps for boot camp. So he's just standing at straight up at attention, buck ass naked in a room with 40 other dudes. My ex told me a story about how someone busted loud, heinous ass in formation one day and this big scary drill sergeant came right over to the offender, filled his lungs with a big deep noisy sniff, and said, that's that shit I like. Ex said that was the scariest, craziest dude he's ever met in his life. Ooh boy, not a marching NCO. Canadian Armed Forces, but I remember going to basic. They had us all single filed into a classroom, and seated by name. So, of course, our marching NCO starts asking, why did you join? The first unlucky fellow docent address the MCPL's rank and just goes on talking, gets blasted. We go around the room and for the most part it's pretty good. Then Buddy's turn comes up. He makes the same mistake as the first guy. Before the MC place can even start yelling, Buddy says, I am sorry, Master Chief. Yes, Halo Master Chief. My MC place just stared at him, lightly chuckled, then the whole room burst into laughter. Buddy was from then on nicknamed Master Chief. Not funny to me, but to those reading my report after. I had called over 3 privates to pass on information. Typically they stand at attention and wait for instruction. One of them, while at attention, pulled an apple out of his pocket and took a massive bite, filling his whole mouth with it. Obviously my reaction was shock. And as I opened my mouth to yell at him, he put up his hand and held out his index finger and shushed me, making an noise as he chewed. Needless to say, he did not pass that basic course. I was in AIC with a PFC Torres from Puerto Rico. He learned English by watching TV but was predominantly a Spanish speaker before signing up. He stumbled over a response and this exchange happened. DS. Torres, are you stupid? Torres, I'm smart in Spanish. Drill sergeant. Not a DS. But in my final PT test in basic training I crapped my shorts but also got my fastest time. My DS said, Private Jack 11058, what got into you? Just before I barfed, I said, it's not what got into me, it's what came out. He sniffed, retched, and ordered me to the showers. I wasn't a drill instructor. Just one of the maggots. On the first night, when they're screaming at you for hours, they told everybody to go shave. This one Asian dude came out of the latrine with no eyebrows. They screamed, what the frock did you do? You said to shave your whole face. Sir. Not a drill sergeant or T.I. in the Air Force, but the day of our graduation our T.I. had to be at the parade grounds before us, so a T.I. from another squadron volunteered to march us there. As soon as we got to the bridge overpass parallel to the parade grounds, he breaks out a tune to the SpongeBob SquarePants opening in front of the base commander, Chief Master Sergeant of Lackland A.F.B. Visitors other flights and T.I.S. and yes, we sang that song while marching. It was revenge for our T.I. getting honor flight again, like the 10th time in 6 years, which was apparently a big thing. Anywho, I heard my T.I. tell him, "I'm gonna kill you." When we got in formation. Fun day. We were moving back from the rifle range and I was on the working part moving everyone's sea bags into our barracks. Recruit A to D. Sir, there are 78 sea bags. Sir. D. Recruit B. Recount these sea bags in case Recruit A thinks he has 12 toes due to all the inbreeding that goes on where he's from. Recruit B. Yes, sir. D. By the way, Recruit A. How many of your cousins have you dated? Recruit A. 3. Sir. D stifles a laugh, then runs into the hut. Office. And slams the door. The rest of the working party, 5 to 6 recruits, busts out laughing. I'd like a moment of silence for Art Tales from Basic. A sub built for this sit that died far too soon. Not a drill sergeant. My very last week of basic training we were formed up for our final haircuts. We're ready to go, we were about to graduate and formed up behind us as a brand new flight. They had just gotten there the night before and were getting their first haircuts before uniform issue. So we're just standing there waiting. When we see a female MTI hurry past us, knife hand raised and ready to strike. As she's moving she's yelling, "Trainee, what is that? It better not be what I think that is." My MTI looks over, tells us to about face and stand at ease so we can watch, and sure enough in the very first rank of the flight is a kid wearing khakis with what is unmistakably piss running down his leg. Ma'am, I had to utilize the latrine but not anymore. I feel bad for that kid. I was in reception battalion prior to starting basic training. A drill sergeant said something to one of the new recruits who didn't hear him and asked, "What?" The drill sergeant didn't take too kindly to this and proceeded to lay into the new recruit. Finally the recruit says, "I'm sorry drill sergeant. I'll never say what again." Drill sergeant comes back with, "Bullshit. When I'm done with you you will be saying what every 5 seconds. You'll be saying, 'What size boot is up my ass? What nuts are on my chin?' Still makes me laugh to this day." Not a DS, but one of the recruits on my basic training misspelled his allergies form from penicillin to penicillin, and out staff ordered him to yell out as loud as he could what he was allergic to in front of our whole platoon, and this kid just yells out, "IMALERGIC to PENISCILIN master CORPRAL. Our master corporal just yells back, "Then you better stay away from that dick recruit." Funniest thing that happened in basic. At 8 in Arizona and drill sergeants did room inspections. They found a computer magazine under someone's mattress, who was known for being a bit of computer nerd to everyone. Relatively quiet and nice guy, not really the comedian type. They called him out during formation and said usually they find porn. "I'm sorry drill sergeant. Computers are the only thing that will take my 3.5-inch floppy." Everyone, cadre included, lost their collective sits. 100-year-old recruit story from the book, Making the Corps. Recruit shows up to Paris Island in 1917 and brought his golf clubs because he heard there was great golf in South Carolina. Drill sergeants made him carry his clubs everywhere. Apparently he had to do his final 15-mile ruck march carrying all of his standard gear, and his golf clubs. Not a DS, but still a story worth telling. When I was going through OSUT back in the day we were doing the initial inventory of gear we had been issued, and a private was having a hard time finding his whoopee. Everyone else had theirs raised in the air so the DS could get a count, and he is scrambling around searching for it. DS walks right over to him and picks it up off the ground in front of him. The DS screams, "Why the fuck couldn't you find this 127? It's right in front if you." Private responds loudly and confidently, "Because it is camouflage drill sergeant." DS immediately walks out of the bay, probably to laugh his ass off. Not a DS, but have a cousin who was one. Retired from the Army Rangers. Became a DS. Tough bastard. He told us a story about how was having the recruits run laps around the barracks and a group of 3 of them thought they would be smart and take a little shortcut behind a building where they thought they wouldn't be seen. Cousin found out and hid behind some bushes and waited for them to come around again. They took the shortcut again and he sprang into action, screaming and shouting at them. One of the recruits literally started screaming. He said it sounded like Marvin from Home Alone when he got the spider on his face. When teaching drill we tell the candidates to call out the time. E.g. 1, 2, 3, 1. While learning and eventually transition to calling the time in your head when they can all do it in unison. One candidate asked me if he could change how the timing for salute on the march went during his drill test. Swap out one word for a different letter. Same timing but different wording. I explained that during the drill test you don't call out the time, you just say it in your head. He said he knew that he just didn't want to get penalized for changing it. It took more back and forth between us than I would have ever expected for him to figure out I couldn't read his mind and he could use whatever words he wanted in his head. My husband had Irish setter red hair when he was in basic. Got hassled about it left and right. They were standing in morning ranks and the DS got up in his face, yelling, "Last name, what the hell happened to give you hair that red? My husband had been dealing with these questions since grade school and really didn't appreciate the question. He answered, full-throated, Drill Sergeant. Mama's fussy was rusty. Drill Sergeant. The DS just dipped his chin to his chest, hat brim covering his face, and his whole body just rocked with silent laughter. Yeah. Husband still ended up running laps. During our cadre course, promotion selection, one of the privates is taker her drill assessment, taking the platoon through some basic marching on the square, decides to shout, swing those shoulders, rather than, swing those arms. The entire platoon starts mincing across the parade square as ordered. The entire DS for the course pisses themselves laughing while the SSGT turns purple. Story from a friend who was at Sandhurst, on an exercise which involved diving into cover on command. An Arab cadet didn't know what stinging nettles were, and made a heroic dive into a huge thicket of them. He stood up shouting, "Color SGT! Color SGT! These effing flowers have poisoned me." Single quote. Both the platoon and color sergeant crashed out laughing. When I was in basic training, all of the recruits including myself were on the quarterdeck learning how to cut our belts to the proper length and which way to put our belt. The drill instructor showed us the buckle end and then he said that the other end is called the dig. So he told us to put the dig in the left side of the trousers, and while we were doing that a recruit blurted out, "Sir, this recruit's dick is on the right side." After looping it. Not a drill instructor but witnessed a very funny moment with one of our DIs. He was instructing us in how to properly clean our rifles and one recruit wasn't using enough CLP, so the DI started screaming at him and ended his rant with, "Lubrication is key in all things." And a recruit shouted out, "That's what she said." Everyone started laughing including the DI. Then he proceeded to haze the shit out of us. He was a particularly harsh DI. And after graduation he told the platoon that was one of the only times he ever broke and started laughing.